Mindvine Studios presents.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take a whole stack of sources and really try to pull out the key insights for you.
And today we're diving into Jason Stanley's book, How Fascism Works, The Politics of Us and Them. It's quite a powerful read.
Yeah, it really is. And Stanley, he's a philosophy professor at Yale, right?
That's right. And this book isn't just, a history lesson about regimes from the past.
That's more like he identifies these specific tactics, this kind of fascist politics, he calls it.
Exactly. Tactics that can pop up anywhere in any country to grab power. And even if they don't lead to a full-blown fascist state, Stanley argues they're incredibly dangerous. He pulls from history, philosophy, social psychology, all sorts of areas.
So our mission today really is to unpack these tactics for you, give you the tools to spot them, because the core idea, Stanley says, is splitting people, and us and a them.
It's fundamental. And what's fascinating right from the get-go is how he roots this in American history. It's not just something that happened over there.
He brings up Charles Lindbergh, American hero, famous aviator.
But also leader of the America First movement before World War II. Actively arguing against the U.S. fighting Nazi Germany.
And he wrote this piece in Reader's Digest, 1939, talking about white ramparts and warning against alliances with foreign races. It's pretty explicit.
Disturbingly so. And Stanley draws that line straight to modern politics. He points to Donald Trump using that same America First slogan.
And the travel bans, refugee caps. Stanley connects them back to things like the 1924 Immigration Act, which deliberately limited immigration from non-white groups and Jewish people.
And, this hits close to home for Stanley. His own father was a refugee.
Really?
Yeah, Manfred Stanley escaped Nazi Germany as a kid in *39, sailed right past the Statue of Liberty into New York. So for him, this isn't abstract theory. It's about real lives, real stakes. It makes this whole discussion feel very urgent for you listening now.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's get into the tactics themselves. Stanley's first one, the mythic past. What's that about?
It's this idea of a perfect, pure history, a golden age that's been lost and, crucially, needs to be brought back. But the key thing is, it's mythic. It's not real history.
It's fabricated.
Deliberately, it taps into nostalgia, but it uses that feeling to sell fascist ideas, things like strict authority, hierarchy, ethnic purity. Mussolini was really open about it. He said, "We have created our myth. The myth is a faith, a passion. It is not necessary for it to be a reality."
Wow. Just admitted it.
Pretty much. And the Nazi ideologue Alfred Rosenberg talked about using it strategically to kind of anchor the coming generation in this invented past.
And a core feature of this mythic past, Stanley says, is always an extreme version of the traditional family, right? Patriarchy.
Absolutely central. The leader is like the strong father figure. You had Nazi figures pushing militarism for men, pure motherhood for women. One historian, Stanley cites, calls Nazi Germany the most extreme case of anti-feminism in the 20th century.
And we see echoes today.
Oh, definitely. Look at Poland's Law and Justice Party, PS. They talk about returning to conservative Christian traditions. They're hostile to LGBTQ rights, trying to ban abortion almost entirely.
It's about enforcing a specific social order.
Exactly. Or you have neo-Nazis like Andrew Auernheimer arguing women were historically property in Europe. It's not just tradition, it's about power and control, justified by this invented past. Even the Rwandan genocide had elements of this, with the Hutu 10 Commandments defining women's roles to ensure ethnic purity.
And in the U.S. context, make America great again. It's vague, right?
What past are we talking about?
Well, Steve Bannon, Trump's strategist at the time, apparently pointed to the 1930s, which is a pretty troubling era, considering the sympathy for fascism back then.
Right. And even when figures like Romney or Paul Ryan responded to Trump's comments about women, they often framed it as defending wives and daughters.
Which subtly reinforces that patriarchal view, doesn't it? Instead of just saying all citizens deserve equal respect. So this myth-making isn't just about good old days. It's also about erasing the bad stuff, the inconvenient truths.
Precisely. Erasing past sins. Think about Confederate monuments in the U.S. Many went up long after the Civil War, aiming to create this heroic Southern past, downplaying slavery. Trump even framed connecting that past to slavery as an attempt to victimize white Americans.
Or Myanmar with the Rohingya, just declaring, there is no such thing as Rohingya. It is fake news.
Yeah.
Wiping them out of history.
It's chilling. Poland's 2018 law criminalizing suggestions of Polish complicity in Nazi atrocities is another example. Marine Le Pen in France denying French involvement in rounding up Jews.
I want them to be proud of being French again, by forgetting parts of history.
And Germany's AfD leader wanting Germans to be proud of the accomplishments of our soldiers in both world wars. It sounds so similar to Himmler in 36 wanting Germans to be proud again of our history.
So, okay, why does this relentless focus on a fake past matter so much for you, the listener?
Because democracy needs a shared reality. It needs a reasonably accurate view of history to function. Stanley mentions research showing we already have a bias towards forgetting our own group's bad deeds.
So politicians pushing this myth are just
Adding fuel to the fire, exactly. Turning history into propaganda. W.E.B. Du Bois wrote about this back during Reconstruction, how historians deliberately created a false narrative to justify taking rights away from black citizens. It's a powerful political weapon.
Okay, so the mythic past sets the emotional stage. Then comes propaganda, Stanley's second mechanism. This is about hiding the real goals.
Yeah, masking them. Wrapping problematic aims in widely accepted ideals. Nixon's war on crime is a textbook case.
You mentioned H.R. Haldeman's diary.
Right. Nixon basically said, look, the problem is the blacks, but we need a system that deals with that without appearing to. So law and order becomes the mask for a racist agenda.
And the corruption angle is fascinating, too. Fascist movements often scream about corruption,
while being incredibly corrupt themselves. Richard Grumberger wrote about Nazi Germany, saying corruption was central, yet people saw the leaders as morally upright.
How does that work?
Because for fascists, corruption often means something different. It means upsetting the traditional order.
So Obama being president could be seen as corruption, women gaining power.
Exactly. It's framed as a corruption of the natural hierarchy, not necessarily financial wrongdoing.
And attacking courts, like in Hungary or Poland, gets framed as rooting out bias or corruption.
When it's really about installing loyalists. Subversion disguised as reform.
They even twist liberal ideas like freedom.
Oh, absolutely. Frederick Douglass called this out way back in 1852. Celebrating liberty while enslaving people, he argued the rhetoric only worked because people believed non-whites weren't suitable recipients of freedom.
And Hitler's true Germanic democracy.
Sounded good, right? Free choice of the leader. But it meant voting once, then absolute rule. No more elections. Democracy redefined as dictatorship.
It's like Goebbels said, using democracy's freedoms against itself.
We see that today. Think about Jeff Sessions trying to prosecute someone for laughing at his hearing.
While at the same time blasting universities for supposedly stifling free speech.
Right, and Trump calling for NFL players kneeling during the anthem, exercising their free speech to be fired. It's pure hypocrisy.
Or those free speech rallies in Portland where violence broke out, shouting free speech or die, while attacking people.
That's speech designed to destroy dialogue, not enable it. And the really insidious part, as Kenneth Burke pointed out about Mein Kampf, is how leaders like Hitler frame irrational fanaticism as being driven by reason.
Using the language of reason to promote unreason.
Precisely. Elevating emotion and prejudice over actual critical thinking. It really makes you question what's being presented as reasonable in politics today.
Which leads us straight into Stanley's third mechanism, the anti-intellectual strategy. Attacking education, experts, even language itself.
Yeah, the goal here is to undermine public discourse entirely, boiling everything down to power and tribal identity. Universities, Stanley says, become a key battleground.
Because they foster critical thinking.
Exactly. So, dissent gets reframed as violence. Think about the Black Lives Matter protests on campuses like Mizzou. They were raising serious issues about racism, the curriculum.
And they got portrayed as an angry mob.
Dismissing the substance by attacking the form. And then you have this broader campaign, often from the right, accusing universities of being hypocritical on free speech, of silencing conservative voices.
Driven by figures like David Horowitz.
Yes, Horowitz is central here. Books listing dangerous professors, dangerous courses, setting up organizations to push for intellectual diversity, which often means just hiring more conservatives.
And Stanley connects Horowitz directly to the Trump administration. Pence, Sessions, Stephen Miller.
Miller was even described by Horowitz as a protege. Bannon, too. It's a coordinated network aiming to influence education and academia.
Which is ironic, given universities are probably some of the freest places for expression in the country.
It really is Orwellian. Then they go after things like tenure. Yeah. You had a state rep in Missouri calling tenure un-American, wanting to ban it because professors shouldn't do political stuff.
Meaning stuff the representative disagrees with.
Pretty much. It's about controlling what can be researched and taught, silencing inconvenient views.
And they target specific fields, don't they? Gender studies, African American studies?
Labeling them cultural Marxism or just too political. We see this in Russia, targeting gender studies as part of pushing back against Western feminism. Hungary, Poland, same thing.
Like North Carolina's governor suggesting gender studies or Swahili don't belong in public universities.
Right. Defining what knowledge is legitimate. For fascists, education isn't about inquiry. It's about reinforcing the mythic past, teaching hierarchy. Promoting great books curricula focused only on white European achievements can, Stanley warns, unintentionally spread those myths.
And huge amounts of money flow into this from conservative groups like the Koch Foundation.
Yes, shaping education is a major goal. Look at Orban nationalizing schools in Hungary, putting anti-Semitic writers on reading lists. Erdogan in Turkey, purging academics, removing evolution from the curriculum, promoting national values.
And extends beyond universities too, right? Denigrating expertise in general.
Oh, yeah. Think of Rush Limbaugh railing against the four corners of deceit. Government, academia, science, media. Fascist leaders are presented as men of action, not thinkers. They reject culture.
And language itself gets degraded.
Victor Klemperer wrote about the language of the Third Reich being deliberately impoverished, designed to strip individuality, make people into unthinking cattle. Hitler was blunt. Propaganda needs simple slogans aimed at the masses, not the intellect.
Sway the will, not convince the mind.
Exactly. As Steve Bannon put it, anger and fear is what gets people to the polls. Emotion over reason.
So what's the impact on you, the listener, when education and language are degraded like this?
It destroys the common ground needed for democracy. Debate becomes impossible if you can't agree on basic facts or trust experts. Politics turns into tribal warfare, entertainment even.
The strongman leader becomes appealing.
Right. Someone like Trump, by breaking norms and lying openly, could be seen as more authentic because he voiced taboo feelings.
It's like Plato warned, demagogues can use freedom to tear reality apart.
An extreme inequality fuels this. Stanley argues it breeds delusions. The rich think they earned it all. The resentful get misdirected towards minorities. He points to how racism in the U.S. got poor whites to back policies benefiting rich whites just because they shared the same skin color.
Which leads us to the next pillar, hierarchy. The idea that nature itself dictates that some groups are superior.
Yes, this challenges the core democratic idea of equality. Social dominance theory talks about how societies create legitimation myths to justify these hierarchies. Fascist politics presents these myths as just natural facts.
Like Alexander Stevens, the Confederate VP, saying slavery wasn't just policy, it was the natural and normal condition for black people, because the Constitution's equality principle violated the laws of nature.
It's a brutal justification, and you see echoes today when people push for reasoned discourse about supposed genetic differences between races in things like intelligence.
Like Charles Murray or Steven Pinker popularizing views about Ashkenazi Jews being inherently smarter.
Stanley calls that the smiling face of race science. It seems academic, but it opens the door to ranking other groups. He critiques Pinker for complaining about political correctness, blocking research into dangerous ideas like innate differences between men and women or racial differences in testosterone. Research, I should add, that is highly suspect.
And this idea of hierarchy feeds into the deserving versus undeserving narrative we saw in 2016.
Exactly. Disdain for those getting government aid, often coded as Black Americans being lazy. But liberal democracy says equal respect isn't based on how hard you work.
So fascists see liberalism, with its talk of equality, as making dominant groups weak.
Right, susceptible to power sharing. Hiller wrote about this. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion frames liberalism as a weapon used by Jews to undermine traditional power structures.
So equality isn't a goal, it's a threat. A Trojan horse used by minorities to take over.
That's the fascist view. Equality is seen as dangerous because it challenges the natural hierarchy and the privileged status of the dominant group.
So the question for you, listening, is, how do societies justify treating people unequally?
This ideology mixes anxiety, fear of losing status, with resentment, fear of hated groups getting equal recognition. It's particularly potent when empires decline, Stanley notes, like the Ottoman Empire or maybe the U.S. after the Cold War. People confront the myth of their own exceptionalism and hierarchical feelings surge.
This fear of losing status links directly to the next mechanism, victimhood, where dominant groups start feeling like they're the ones being oppressed.
It's a powerful twist. Think about Andrew Johnson vetoing the Civil Rights Act in 1866. He literally said giving black people basic rights was discrimination against white people.
That inversion is stark. And today,
White Americans tend to vastly overestimate how much progress has been made on racial equality. The economic gap is still huge, but many white people are just unaware.
and polls show significant numbers of Trump supporters believing whites or Christians are the most persecuted groups in America.
It's a profound disconnect from reality. Stanley cites a study where just telling white Americans about the coming demographic shift, where whites will no longer be the majority, made them more likely to support right-wing policies, restrict immigration, oppose affirmative action.
This feeling of group threat seems universal in these movements.
And Stanley draws a key distinction here between different kinds of nationalism. Nationalism born of oppression like Zionism initially, or black nationalism, or Gandhi's movement aims for equality.
But fascist nationalism.
That's different. It's about domination, maintaining or regaining the top spot in the hierarchy. A slogan like Black Lives Matter isn't saying only Black Lives Matter. It's saying Black Lives Matter too, calling attention to inequality. But it gets twisted by opponents.
And it's true, right, that fixing injustice can feel like a loss to those who benefited from the old system.
Yes, and that feeling, that pain is real. If your whole life the heroes looked like you, seeing different faces might feel like marginalization, like something's being taken away.
And fascist propaganda jumps on that feeling.
Absolutely. It plays aching hymns to the sense of anguish that accompanies loss of dominant status. It manipulates that genuine feeling and turns it into aggrieved victimhood, fueling resentment.
Like the men's rights movement. Men feeling like victims of feminism, even while holding most positions of power.
Kimmel's analysis points exactly there. It's a nostalgia for a past where their dominance was unquestioned, mixed with anxiety about the present.
And media outlets like Breitbart feed this with anti-immigrant stories, creating paranoia about Muslim colonization or refugees bringing disease.
Manufacturing threats to stoke that victim feeling. And sometimes, tragically, real histories of past oppression get twisted. Serbian nationalists use their genuine suffering in WWII to justify atrocities against Muslims later on. Milicevic built his power on an exaggerated narrative of Serbian victimhood.
The Israeli right sometimes uses the history of Jewish suffering to justify policies towards Palestinians.
It's a dangerous pattern. And look at Viktor Orban in Hungary, talking about Christian persecution in Europe, blaming immigration policies, casting himself as the defender against barbarian hordes.
Urging people to reject human rights as outdated.
Which shows you just how powerful this victimhood narrative is. You really have to ask, who is claiming victimhood? Why? And against whom? Is it being used to justify new forms of oppression?
Okay, let's move to law and order. Stanley argues this becomes a way to divide citizens into the lawful us and the inherently lawless them.
The Central Park 5 case is a perfect, horrifying example. 5 Black and Latino teens, innocent, railroaded for rape in 1989.
And Donald Trump took out ads demanding the death penalty.
Yes. And years later, Jeff Sessions, as Attorney General, actually praised those comments as showing Trump's commitment to law and order, even knowing the boys were innocent.
So law and order in that context doesn't mean justice.
It seems to mean a system that assumes young Black men are the problem, that their very existence is a threat to order.
So in this framework, being different, non-white, LGBTQ, immigrant, unconventional, makes you inherently lawless.
That's the implication. You violate the traditional norms, so you are, by definition, outside the law-abiding us. Historically, the Nazis did this with Jews, constantly portraying them as criminals, threats to order.
The author's grandmother told a story about her cousin's husband.
Sent to a concentration camp for minor traffic fines. Why? Because he was Jewish, therefore labeled a criminal. It wasn't about the fines.
We see similar logic in calls to deport immigrants for minor offenses, or Trump's focus on criminal aliens.
And Stanley brings up this psychological bias, linguistic intergroup bias. It's subtle but revealing.
How does that work?
If someone from our group does something bad, like steal, we tend to describe the specific action. Daniel stole chocolate. Concrete.
Okay.
But if someone from the other group does the same thing, we're more likely to use an abstract label that defines their character. Jerome is a thief, or a criminal.
So the act becomes who they are.
Exactly. It marks them permanently, pushes them outside the circle of us. It's how language helps criminalize entire groups.
Like labeling protests as riots, especially when Black communities are involved.
Right. The civil rights movement faced this. Baltimore in 2015 faced this. Fox News heavily favored the word riot over protest in Baltimore. It frames the participants as inherently disorderly, justifying crackdowns.
And Nixon built his '68 campaign on law and order, paving the way for mass incarceration. Trump echoed that.
Even though crime rates were historically low when Trump campaigned, but the rhetoric works.
And the results are devastating. The sheer scale of mass incarceration in the U.S., especially impacting black men.
It's staggering. 1 in 3 black men likely to be incarcerated at some point. And this is often justified by pseudoscience trying to link blackness and criminality going back over a century.
There was research showing how just seeing black faces in mugshots made white voters less likely to support reforming harsh sentencing laws.
Jennifer Eberhardt's work, it shows the deep-seated biases, and crucially, Stanley points out the contrast in public discourse. Compare the punitive law and order approach to issues in black communities versus the language of public health crisis, compassion, and treatment used for the opioid epidemic, which primarily affected white rural communities, often Trump's base.
The empathy gap is huge.
It lays bare how language and policy create these criminalized others, making rational debate impossible and leading to terrible outcomes.
Which brings us to a particularly visceral mechanism, sexual anxiety. Stanley argues that fascists weaponize fears about threats to the traditional family and manhood, especially rape and deviance.
Yes, particularly when traditional male roles feel threatened, maybe by economic change. The propaganda often pushes fear of race mixing, of the pure nation being corrupted.
Like Lindbergh's fear of inferior blood.
Or the Black Horror on the Rhine propaganda after World War I in Germany. Completely fabricated stories of black French soldiers raping German women en masse.
Hitler latched onto that, right? Blamed the Jews for it.
He did. Claimed it was a Jewish plot to destroy the white race. And this same lie was spread by the KKK in America.
And in the U.S. context, Angela Davis called the false rape charge against black men one of racism's most powerful tools.
Used to justify lynching. Figures like a Benjamin Tillman openly advocated it. Ida B. Wells showed most lynching victims weren't even accused of rape, but people believed there was this epidemic of black men raping white women. The myth was stronger than reality.
And this isn't just historical.
Not at all. Look at Myanmar again. The ethnic cleansing of the Rohingya was fueled by paranoid theories about Muslim men preying on Buddhist women. Rape rumors sparked violence.
India's love jihad campaigns against Muslims.
Claiming Muslim men are tricking Hindu women into marriage to convert them, creating an enemy other through sexual fear. Trump starting his campaign by calling Mexican immigrants rapists. Fake news about Syrian refugees in Idaho, Russian propaganda about immigrants raping women in Europe. It's a constant theme.
And it's not just about race mixing. It targets sexual minorities, too.
Yes, especially transgender people and gay people. They're framed as threats to traditional gender roles. Think about North Carolina's bathroom bill, HB 2.
Based on the unfounded fear of transgender girls being predators.
Exactly. Julia Serrano, in Whipping Girl, argues that trans women embracing femininity deeply threatens patriarchal ideology, which relies on male supremacy. So, attacks on trans women are a key sign for Stanley of fascist politics rising.
So the pattern is, take real anxieties, maybe economic ones, and redirect them.
Twist them into fear that your family, your way of life, is under existential threat from those who don't conform to traditional norms.
Like that Hungarian historian blaming Germany's acceptance of refugees on German men becoming unmanly.
It's a way to attack liberal values, freedom, equality indirectly, by framing them not as ideals, but as dangerous threats to safety and tradition. Stanley calls this maybe the most vivid sign of democracy eroding.
Next up, Sodom and Gomorrah. The city versus the countryside.
Yeah, the idea that cities are decadent, sinful places of blood mixing while the rural heartland is pure and traditional.
Hitler's Mein Kampf again.
Classic example. He romanticizes his small hometown, but describes Vienna as a poisonous snake, full of Jews, Czechs, Poles, a motley collection. Cities for him were hotbeds of blood mixing. Nazi ideology idealized the rural peasant as the source of pure German values, the backbone of military power.
And this urban-rural divide plays out politically today.
Massively. Surveys show huge gaps in attitudes towards immigrants between U.S. cities and rural areas. Rural residents far more likely to see immigrants as a burden.
Marine Le Pen's base in France is largely rural, right? Even in places with few immigrants.
Exactly. Same with Trump's support. Anti-immigrant rhetoric resonates most strongly in rural areas, often places with very little actual immigration.
Is it fueled by economics? Feeling left behind?
That's part of it. A sense that cities get all the resources, hoard the wealth. Even if statistically metro areas drive the economy, the perception of being ignored is powerful.
And then you get rhetoric like Trump's about burning in crime-infested inner cities, claiming black communities are in the worst shape ever.
Even when crime rates were low, it fits the fascist narrative. Cities as diseased, full of lazy minorities living off the hardworking rural folk.
Because cities tend to be more diverse, more tolerant.
Which is a direct threat to the fascist ideal of a uniform chosen nation sharing one culture, one religion. So cities become targets representing elites, liberals, minorities, everything the fascist hates.
And this connects to the ideal of rural self-sufficiency, not depending on the state, unlike those parasites in the city.
Yes. Mussolini denounced cities for making people infertile and sterile. Hitler called Jews parasites. It's about who is seen as productive and who is seen as draining resources.
Which sets up the final chilling mechanism. Arbeit macht frei. Work shall make you free.
The slogan over the gates of Auschwitz. Stanley uses it to show how the ideal of hard work gets weaponized against minorities and how policies are designed to make the myths about them seem true.
How does that work in practice?
Think about the drastically different federal responses to Hurricane Harvey in Texas versus Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico.
Both U.S. territories, but treated differently.
Very differently. And many Trump supporters in Texas, getting aid themselves, felt Puerto Ricans should just do your job, be responsible. It reflects the idea that state support is only for us, the chosen nation. They are lazy or criminal, so they don't deserve help.
This links back to attacking welfare.
Denouncing it as handouts to undeserving minorities who reaped where they have not sown language straight from early Nazi guidelines. Research shows white opposition to welfare in the U.S. is strongly linked to believing black people are lazy.
Marine Le Pen talking about immigrants turning France into a giant squat.
It's the same rhetoric. And Hannah Arendt's point here is crucial. Fascist propaganda isn't just about lying. It aims to make the lies become real by creating the conditions that fit the stereotype. If you systematically brutalize a group, impoverish them, force them into refugee camps, restrict their ability to work,
they will look destitute and dependent.
Exactly. Then you can point and say, see, they are lazy parasites. The Slovak state did this to Jews before deporting them. Myanmar did it to the Rohingya. As Frantz Fanon said, it is the racist who creates the inferiorized.
And mass incarceration in the U.S. fits this pattern.
Stanley argues, yes, black men face hugely disproportionate incarceration rates. Then, having a criminal record devastates job prospects.
Especially for black men, even compared to white men with records.
Diva Pager's study showed that starkly. So the system creates unemployment and poverty, which then reinforces the lazy stereotype. It becomes a vicious cycle.
And Nixon's administration knew this, building prisons while cutting anti-poverty programs.
Stanley suggests it was intentional. He argues current Republican plans to cut social safety nets while boosting the criminal justice system show a willful ignorance, a bad faith, designed to create the conditions where racist stereotypes seem true.
Another target Stanley mentions is labor unions. Why them?
Because unions unite people across race, class, religion. They build solidarity, which is the opposite of the division fascism needs.
Hitler hated unions.
Saw them as destroying national unity and efficiency. Arndt argued fascism needs people to be atomized, disconnected. Strong unions prevent that. Research shows lower union density correlates with higher inequality.
Du Bois wrote about how racism was used after the Civil War to break cross-racial labor movements.
Exactly, preventing poor whites and blacks from uniting for economic justice. And the origins of right-to-work laws are explicitly racist.
The lobbyist Vance Muse.
Openly racist and anti-Semitic, arguing these laws were needed so white workers wouldn't have to call black workers brother. These laws weaken unions, paving the way, Stanley argues, for the kind of politics we see today.
It all ties back to this idea of life as a struggle, like social Darwinism, where only the productive deserve.
Yes. Why label groups lazy? Yeah. Why did the Nazis call disabled people life unworthy of life? Because they weren't seen as productive, they depended on the state. Hitler admired the hierarchy of business, the CEO model. Democracy was inefficient.
Like Paul Ryan's makers versus takers rhetoric.
It taps into that same vein. Stanley's point is that even free market libertarianism supports corporate hierarchy. And when voters yearn for a CEO as president, they are responding to their own implicit fascist impulses.
It's a bleak picture, how this all works together.
The core insight, Stanley suggests, is how fascism exploits a dark part of human nature. Our own suffering feels more bearable if we believe those we look down on are suffering even more. It offers a perverse kind of dignity through hierarchy.
So just to recap for everyone listening,
Yeah.
all these tactics, the mythic past, propaganda, anti-intellectualism, creating unreality, insisting on hierarchy, weaponizing victimhood, twisting law and order, stoking sexual anxiety, demonizing cities, and redefining work, they all interlock.
They reinforce each other, creating this narrative. We are good, hardworking, traditional. They are lazy, dangerous, corrupt, trying to destroy us with liberal ideas.
And the danger is normalization, that we get used to it.
That's the normalization trap Stanley warns about. Psychologists found our sense of what's normal shifts based on what becomes statistically common and what we think is ideally proper. So outrageous actions or speech, repeated often enough,
Start to seem less outrageous, less worthy of anger.
exactly. It just becomes the new normal. Stanley's own grandmother wrote about this in Nazi Germany, the gap between the horrors she saw and the denial within the Jewish community itself. Normalization makes the unthinkable seem ordinary. Charges of fascism start to sound like overreacting.
Even as the ground is fundamentally shifting.
And the ultimate target, Stanley argues, isn't just the them group, it's everyone. It's the audience fascism tries to capture, pulling them into this mass delusion, ultimately subjugating even those who thought they were part of the us.
So, a final thought for you to take away from this deep dive. Stanley paints a challenging picture for the future. Think about climate change, rising inequality, political instability.
We're likely to see huge movements of people across borders. Refugees, traumatized, impoverished.
And how will they be framed by leaders using these tactics?
As rapists, terrorists, criminals, the very suffering that should evoke empathy will be twisted into the source of danger.
The challenge then becomes immense, doesn't it? How do we hold on to common humanity, foster empathy, when fear makes the comforting arms of mythic superiority so tempting?
That's the struggle. Stanley's final plea, really, is to refuse to be bewitched by fascist myths, to stay free to see each other as flawed humans, none of us perfect, none of us demons, and engage with that complex reality.